I will give it a few seconds for people to join and then I'm going to get started. All right. So thanks everyone. My name is Julia. I'm a scientific engagement manager here at protocols.io. Today you are at the tips and tricks webinar. So this is a little bit more of an advanced webinar where I'm going to be diving into practically using protocols.io and some of the more advanced functionality. So if you are very new to protocols.io, don't really know what it's about yet, I would recommend starting with one of our more introductory webinars. You can still stay, but just know that we will be skipping over some of the more kind of basic introduction and how to use protocols.io. So a little bit of housekeeping, you will see that I've already started recording the webinar, and as a registrant, you will receive an email with the link to the recording of this webinar so you can view it afterwards as well. Closed captioning should also be enabled if you do want to use them. If English isn't your first language, when you do receive the webinar recording afterwards, you'll be able to view that on YouTube, and you can change the YouTube settings so that you can have captions in your native language if that's something that would be helpful for you. We will also be having around 15 minutes of Q&A at the end, so there are plenty of time for questions if anybody has them. At the end, there will also be a webinar feedback survey, so just keep that in mind. If you think of any feedback throughout the session that you'd like to share, there will be the opportunity to do so. And if you are a more introductory user, you can check out our other webinars. You'll see these links at the bottom of the slide. And so right before I dive into the session, I did want to make an announcement because this week is actually Love Methods Week. So if you haven't heard of it, it's similar to Love Data Week. It's an online event. There are multiple virtual sessions that are happening on all days this week. The event's hosted by the University of Coimbra and the Quest Center, and Protocols.io and Springer Nature are participating for 2 sessions. One of them is a Protocols.io hackathon, so it might be a really nice opportunity to use what you've learned here and input a protocol that you want to publish onto the platform, and we'll have breakout sessions there to help you do that. The second session is a methods myth-busting panel. So we'll have multiple panel members from different Springer Nature journals who will be speaking around kind of common misconceptions in methods publishing. All right, so let's go ahead and get started then. Oh, actually, I did want to put into the chat the link to that. So if anyone doesn't want to scan the QR code, I will just put that link directly into the chat that you can follow. All right. So for the presentation today, I will have a couple of slides just as a reminder, kind of the overall concept of protocols.io. That will be very brief. Then I'll have a slide talking about some of the different terminology that is important and we use on protocols.io. You should be familiar with it already. And then I will jump into the live demo portion. So we'll move out of the slides onto the platform. It will be very practical information, some advanced use of the editor, run, task, and reagent managers, and then the questions at the end. So this should be relatively familiar to you, but there are 2 sides to protocols.io. So on the one hand, we are an open access repository for publishing protocols and methods. And on the other hand, we are a private collaboration tool. So where you can work with your team in a secure private workspace to keep track of your methods and protocols. So since this is an advanced session, you all should have accounts already created and kind of be somewhat familiar with the private side of protocols.io. Um, and what you'll kind of perhaps get the sense of is that these public and private sides of the platform really feed into one another. So the protocols on the public side can be reused by and bringing them into your private workspace via a new version or fork where you can then build upon them and adapt them for your own lab or research. And then as you're working on the protocols privately, when you are ready to make them open, push them public, it's very easy to do so. They're already in the format needed for publishing. You just click that publish button and push them public. And then this is what it looks like practically. So we see you can then link the methods that you publish on protocols.io into your manuscript if you want. And we see a nice example of that here where they've linked out various pieces of information and have put the methods onto protocols.io. And so now I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about the terminology that we use on protocols.io. So you might have seen when you're viewing a protocol that's been published on the platform, there is a little copy fork button. And you'll also see that potentially multiple versions of protocols have been published. And so I'll talk about the differences in these terminologies. So if we look at versioning first, it's, relatively self-explanatory. And so you can think of a new version as a new version of a protocol that would rectify an error in a step or provide additional optimizations about a specific type area of the protocol. And you can navigate between the different versions on a protocol with that drop down that you'll see at the top of the protocol pages. And so the multiple versions are always linked together. Anyone can create a new version, but if you create a version of someone else's protocol, you cannot then publish that new version. You would need to transfer it back to them because only the owner of the original protocol can publish a new version. And I have a nice analogy that I like to talk about to demonstrate the differences. So if we think about a recipe for chocolate cake, if you improve that recipe, add more sugar, cook it for longer or shorter, then that would be a new version. And so we're looking at a fork next. And so that is if you modified a protocol for a different purpose. So in a scientific sense, it might be different sample type, species, strain, equipment. If we go back to our recipe example, maybe you take that chocolate cake recipe and you fork it and change it so that it's instead a vanilla cake recipe. And so that is when you would use the forking functionality on protocols.io. And so we can see that you can see when a protocol has been forked from another protocol. So anyone can create a fork and anyone can publish a fork because credit is always maintained back to the original protocol developer via this note here. Then the last one is copy. So this is probably used a little bit less often. You can think of it as using a previous protocol as kind of like a template. So maybe I'm creating a completely different recipe. It's not cake, but I want to use the same layout or format as my cake recipe. And so we can see here, this is an example where someone created multiple copies of a protocol because they knew that they would have the same authors and affiliations, for example, but the content and steps of those protocols are all very different. This should also be somewhat familiar to you, but if it isn't already, there are multiple ways of getting your protocols onto protocols.io. So you can, of course, look at all of the published content, create a fork of that and work from that. You can create a blank protocol, and I'll show you a little bit about that today. What we also have and is actually missing here is we have AI assisted um, protocol generation as well. So that can help a little bit with getting you from a blank page to a loose draft that you will then be able to edit and build your protocol from. So I'll show that on the platform. But when you create a blank protocol, you'll see a button here that says generate. We also have the protocol entry service. That's usually used a bit more by our premium customers. If anyone does have specific questions about that, I'm happy to answer them at the end. And then we do also have an AI-assisted protocol importer. So if you have a protocol that is in Word or PDF or really many other formats already, what you can do is you can upload that and we will convert it into the dynamic stepwise format on protocols.io. All right, now I'm going to move out of the slides and into the platform. And because this is a more advanced session, I won't be covering some of the more basic things like searching for published protocols, kind of the concept of workspaces and how they function, um, or kind of the nitty-gritty details of importing and publishing protocols. But you can see there on the right what I will be covering. So let's go ahead and get started and jump into the platform. I'll stop sharing briefly and then reshare. One moment. All right. So we are now in protocols.io in my demo workspace. So as a quick reminder, we can see if I click this down here, the different ways that I can start creating a protocol. And then once I have created a protocol, let's go into some of the advanced editing functionality. I'm just trying to hide my Zoom pop-ups here. All right, so the first thing that I'll show is if you haven't already, I encourage you to really explore the editor. Make sure you are looking at the various tabs along the top. You can put different information in these sections. And then you'll see that you have the ability to add various components. So that's here on the right. You can see in this example, I have put in some maybe more lab-based components. And then we also have more computational focused components for people who want to share their kind of computational workflows alongside any code. So you can see I've put some in here, and these components can all be accessed here on the right. I have some nice examples as well of more computational and lab-based protocols that you can have a look at. It can be nice to see what's possible with the platform. So this is a nice computational one. You can see they've put in different commands. They've linked out to different software packages. This is a really nice protocol. I will put that into the chat. And then this one is a bit more wet lab focused. And so we can see here they've put in other various components, so highlighting the amounts and time as well. And so when you put the information such as amounts and things like that in this structured component format, it becomes a lot more dynamic and reusable. So it's easier for the system to recognize what it is. And then when you are reusing that protocol, You can do things like scale the protocol up and down or scale an individual step up and down. And I can show you that a bit later. So I will move on to adding attachments into your protocol. So you can attach files. So adding attachments can be accessed via this toolbar at the top. So I can go ahead and attach a file. So what you can do is you can search existing files that are already in your workspace on protocols.io. You can also upload a file from your computer. So I will upload this file here as an example. And so we can see that's listed right there in the step. So this can be a really nice way if there is a relevant document or file that is used at that particular step, you can put it straight into the step rather than kind of attaching it to the protocol as a whole. You can add in images as well. I think I've got an image somewhere. Very easy to add in. So you can make it a bit bigger or smaller and add in any figure legends that you need to. You can also add videos into your protocol. This can be really nice if you have quite a complex technique that is just a lot easier to show in a video than explaining it with words. So if it is a really short video, what you can do is attach it directly to the protocol by using that same insert image video button. But we do have a limit in terms of the size of file attachments. So if your video is larger than 1,024 megabytes, then you'll need to use the embed media option. And so that's this option here. So to use this, you would then upload your long video onto a platform like YouTube. So I'm going to insert this video here. So we've got this video on DNA electrophoresis sample loading. So what you can do is click share and then select embed. And so you'll need to copy this embed code. So it's important. It's not the video URL, but it's this embed code. I will then go back into my protocol, go embed media, and paste that in. And we can see there it's put the video in, and I'll be able to play that in protocols.io. All right, moving on. What you can also add in is we have various ways that you can display information. So in things like a table or a plate map, or what we call a smart component, which I'll talk about in a moment. If you would like to add in a table, you'll need to go up to the top bar again. So I have put in this small 3x3 table. And so similarly to Excel, you can put formulas in this table. You can also, there is the ability to rename these headings along the top here. So if I right click on that header, I can do things like rename this column. However, while you can do that, and it can be nice if you do have a relatively basic table, what I would recommend is actually just putting the column headings in this first row. So do something like volume, number of samples. And the reason for that is it can be good to know that and remember that this is column A, B, and C for when you're putting in the formulas. So for example, if I have several samples, and I want to say that I'll put in my units. That's very important. So if I have a volume, each sample is 10 milliliters, and then say I have 10 samples, I can put in the calculation. Sorry, I've got my keyboard is in a different language to the language I normally work in, so it's always a bit of trouble for me to find symbols. Hmm, there we go. It is not on the right key. Okay. So then what you will do is, so a little bit differently from Excel, I can't go ahead and click this cell right here. So I will need to type in A2 and then times B2. Enter. And you can see it's done that calculation automatically. And then I can, create however many rows that I want. And what you can also do is if I just leave those blank, I can have this blank table ready for when someone is using this protocol. They can fill out that relevant information and it will auto-calculate for them. So that can be really nice to put in a protocol. You can also just use it to display information in a table. You can also create a plate map. So I have a nice example here. So if you do already have a kind of well plate map, this might be more relevant to wet lab based biology researchers. But if you do have a well plate map already created in Excel, you can of course attach that as a file. And I have an example one here. I will show, oh, it might not show the right window because of the way I'm sharing. That's okay. It's not really relevant for today. So you can put that well plate as an attachment. And what you can also do is we have a well plate map component. So it is down the bottom here of components, well plate map. So if I click on that, what I can do is I can choose what size that I want. So we have various standard sizes. I can create a custom size as well. And what I can also do is import an Excel file. And I will import this plate map from here. And what it's done is it's taken all of the annotations that were in the cells on Excel, and it has put them in the plates and formatted it as a well plate map. So I can zoom out if I would like to see the whole thing, and I can also view it in full screen mode. So what it didn't pull across, which you weren't able to see, but each of these were colored as well. So color coding is often used in wall plate maps, and you can change the color of these individually here or at a mass scale as well. If we go in here to template settings. So we've got a few kind of standard templates. You can create your own template. So this is a template that I've created, and then it's a lot easier to change the color of multiple cells because you can kind of do shift for multiple selections. And then whatever template that I use will be repeated across my plate map. So I'm going to select this one and save that. And so we can see here that it's applied that coloring. All the negative controls are yellow, positive controls are blue, and the rest of them are green. So it's really nice to see how each cell will be used. All right. And then the next thing that I'll talk about is our smart component. So this is a little bit similar to what I showed up here in the tables in terms of getting people to fill out information as they're following the protocol. And so I'm going to insert a smart component so that I'll access along the side here so we can see smart component. And what it is, it's going to create a blank field where someone would need to fill in information. So for example, I might put in number of cells. And I could mark that required. So if someone was using the run functionality to follow this protocol, they wouldn't be able to proceed until they filled in this information. I can add in additional ones as I want, but I'm just going to add the one today. And so we'll see that in there. So there's a value. Someone will fill that value out when they're actually doing the experiment. And I can also download those values at a later date if I wanted to reuse them somewhere else. And I'll show this in action shortly when what I do, which is run this protocol we see here, or I might run this entire one. This last example here is the ability to nest a protocol within another protocol. So this can be very useful if you have, for example, a protocol that has a buffer recipe. And in this step, you might say use buffer X, and then you can link in that protocol on how to make buffer X. So that can be quite nice. And so we can preview and see what steps are needed for that there. And then this is also a component. So it is added on the right here, the protocol component. Last thing before I move into the run functionality is adding in a step case. So when you might use a step case would be if you have the situation where a protocol needs to diverge for two different situations. So in this example, I've put some text. It says, please select what type of cells that you're working with. So you might have different steps for different types of cells or samples. So step case can be accessed on the left. So I'm going to add a step case. And this is the first case. So I'm going to say there's one set of instructions if you're working with kidney cells. You can add in more information if it's relevant. That's all I'm going to put today. And then we can add another situation if someone's working on liver cells. And then in each of the situations, as I'm adding new steps, they will only be for kidney. So we'll see kidney step 1. And then if we move over to liver, we can see there's no steps there yet. So an important thing to keep in mind is that with the step case, a protocol can diverge, but it can't come back together again. So once you have created this, you can't say after processing, you then kind of go back to one set of steps. But what you can do as a workaround to that is kind of copy and paste the steps into the different step cases. So using this button here, you'll select the steps and then copy and paste them across. And I can go into that in more detail if people want to see it at the end. And then when I'm viewing this protocol, you'll be able to see that here. So it will say, please select, and then I'll have a drop down and I can select which one. All right, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to run this protocol. So we can see this run button here. And so you can see that you can think of the protocol as what someone should do on a specific day. And then the run record is how the protocol was actually followed on that day. because we know that, you know, protocols aren't always followed exactly. Things might go wrong, there might be delays, and certain changes made for troubleshooting. So I'm going to start a run right now. And what it has done is it's converted my protocol into a checklist. So as I'm at the computer, in the lab, wherever I'm following this method, I can come in and I can edit each of these steps to note down if I did something different for this specific run. Any edits that I make here, they'll only change the run record. They won't change the underlying protocol that it was created from. I can add in comments as well to put in observations if I want to do it that way. And then what I can do as well is um, do things like scale the protocol up and down. So I can come up here and I can scale the protocol. And what I will do is scale it by 3. And you can see this information is put in the form of amounts. And so it's automatically done that calculation and multiplied it by 3. As you can imagine, sometimes the way that protocols are laid out, it might not be appropriate to scale the entire protocol in every situation. So if I get rid of that for now, you can also scale individual steps. So I will go down to this example here. So it would be appropriate to scale this step, for example. So I clicked in to edit this step, and then I'll need to go here on the right into settings, and I can just scale that step. And then it hasn't changed any other part of that protocol. And as I'm completing each of these steps, I can be marking them as complete. It's noting when that's been completed, who that's been completed by. All changes are saved here in the History tab. And we can see we've got lots, but we can't continue anymore. And that is because we have gotten to this smart component. So because the smart component has been labeled as required, I can't move on until I have recorded the number of cells. So I'm just going to put 5. That's not a very realistic cell number, but just for the purposes of today. So now that I've filled in that information, I can move on. We'll also see here, so this is that protocol that I have nested within the other protocol. And we'll see that what it's done is it's actually expanded that protocol out into sub-steps. So step 13, which was just step 13 by itself in the original, it's now put in all of the steps from that protocol into the run. So I can follow them here as I'm completing that protocol. If it's not appropriate to be following them, in this specific instance, for example, if it was a buffer that I'd already made, that's fine. I can go ahead and skip those. Oops. No problem. All right. So this run record will remain editable. So if I have, I'm still working on an experiment, I go to lunch, or if it's an overnight experiment, I go home, you can come back and you can open this file up. If you go into your file manager, let's refresh that so we can see the run that's been created. So we can see here, we've got an incomplete run record that's been created. So if multiple people are working on the experiment, you can also work on these runs collaboratively. So if they're in this workspace where that run is created, they can open that up and finish it for me if we were working together. But as soon as I click this finish run button, you can see there's this warning So it then becomes an uneditable record of how that experiment was followed on a specific day. So I'm going to click Finish Run. And what you can do is you can take that record of exactly what was done, and then you can, for example, export it and put it alongside maybe any data that was generated that was following that protocol. So you can leave it in your workspace. You can also export directly to your computer as a PDF. Or if you use one of the electronic lab notebooks that we have an integration with, you can export it directly to your electronic lab notebook. So I have already connected OSF, the Open Science Framework, so I could export it to my lab notebook there. So that is the run functionality. We will move on now to the task manager. So let's go to my workspace again. So if you want to assign, protocols to people or just kind of keep track of your own protocols and tasks, you can use the task manager to do that. So in my workspace, I will click this little arrow and I will be able to see tasks. So I'll click on that. And you can see here, I've already created various test tasks. So the tasks are either open, in progress, or closed. And what you can do is look at them in this list view. You can also look at them in calendar view. So I haven't created any tasks in January yet, so there's nothing there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a task. You can put whatever title you want. You'll need to add a title before you can save. And then after you do that, all the changes that you make will automatically be saved. And so you can add a very basic task with a description, and then you can also attach specific protocols to that task. So let's try and find the protocol that we were working on today. Here we go. Tips and tricks. I just lost it. Jan. It's being a bit slow today. That's okay. For the purposes of this example, we can use this one from another webinar last year. So we can see that I've added a protocol to this task. And then what I can do as well is I can assign that protocol to a specific person. So what I will do is I'm going to assign just part of this protocol. So let's say I know 2 people are going to work on this protocol. I'm going to do steps 1 to 5. And I'm going to assign them to myself. I could also add a specific date range. So for example, steps 1 to 5 should be completed tomorrow. I can put that in if I wanted to. And then I will save that. And then let's say I know I'll only have time to complete steps 1 to 5, and then I'll need to ask my lab mate for help with completing the rest of the protocol. So I can add in someone else. So Leanne is in my workspace, and then I want to assign the rest of the protocol to her. I can then do that. What you can do as well is put in multiple protocols. So you'll see that we've added just a single protocol here. I can also search for more and add them in if it's a group of protocols. I can then say, when I want them to start it, let's say tomorrow. I think I've messed something up here. Let's just refresh it real quick. Okay, so it was saving. So I needed to wait till it was saved. Cool. So I want them to start tomorrow. I think it's going to take 2 days. And so then it will be due. It will be due on the 22nd. So I've got myself and Leanne who are working on that protocol. If I did have perhaps a postdoc in the lab who I wanted to add as another assignee into here to supervise that work, I could do so. So I wouldn't be assigning them a protocol per se, but I would be letting them know that the task existed and they would need to supervise Julia and Leanne with the completion of this protocol. So I can add someone in there if I wanted to. All right, so that task has been completed. So let's go back and we can see in my calendar that we've got this task over these few days. And so Julia and Leanne will both have been notified on protocols.io and also via email that a task has been assigned to them. So they'll be able to open that up and see all of the relevant details. And then when changes are made to that task, I will be notified as well. So let's move on now to another thing that's quite useful in a workspace, and that is the reagent manager. So if I go back into my workspace, I can go here to manage reagents. And then I can, for example, add in the inventory of my lab into here so that when people are creating protocols, they can see a list of what is available. So I've already added in various reagents here, and you can see, you can note down the status, has it been ordered recently or needs to be ordered, how much we have, expiration date, things like that. And if I do want to edit this information, I come here, and so I can edit these details. So we can see here, if I knew we were running low, I could untick that. And so I would be able to search these. So you can add new reagents one by one via this create reagent button. But if you have a very long list, you can just upload it as a CSV file format. So you'll need to click this upload reagents button. And you can see it gives you a little bit of instructions of what format you need to put the file upload in so it recognizes those reagents. Okay. And then the last thing before we move back into the slides, because I know we're coming up on the Q&A time shortly, I'm going to show a little bit about collections. So when publishing on protocols.io, you can, of course, attach an individual protocol file to link an individual protocol file to a publication. If you did have a big group of, say, 5 different protocols that were associated with a publication and you don't want to list a bunch of different DOIs, you want to make sure that they're all associated with each other, you can create a collection. So we can see here, I've created an example collection. If I open that up, we can see here I've got a couple of example protocols that I've added into that collection. And so I can then search for other protocols to add in. And when I view that, this is what people would be able to see. So I could have a single abstract for that collection, a single set of kind of instructions on how the protocols in that collection should be used and followed, um, single title, single author list, all of that for this group of protocols, and people will be able to see they're all associated. And then when I do publish or reserve a DOI, this group of protocols will have a single DOI in addition to the individual DOIs for the protocols. So it can be really nice if you want to publish protocols like that. And I think I've got an example here. So this is a published collection on protocols.io. So you can see there was a group of protocols on rearing flies. So about growing them, media, different things like that. And this collection was linked to this PLOS Biology paper. Okay, we're going to finish up the presentation now. I'm just going to reshare my slides. Let me find my relevant window. Okay. So, of course, we only have so much time in a webinar to talk about all the different things you can do with protocols.io. So, I do want to highlight that as you are using it, there's lots of useful places to get help on our website. So you can visit the Help Center. We also have short video tutorials. And any questions that you do have, please submit them. We have a customer support team who's really great and can help answer those questions for you. And then if you kind of prefer maybe more long form help, we do really regularly run these webinars. You can also watch past webinars on YouTube. You can request a personal one-on-one demo. And if you are in the European time, that will most likely be with me or maybe one other colleague. So there's lots of places that you can access if you need more help using protocols.io. So thank you very much. Before we go into the Q&A, I would like to ask people to take a moment to fill out the webinar feedback survey. So it does really help us to tailor the content, make sure it's as useful as possible for you. So you can see the QR code there on the right. I will also paste in that link into the chat. You will see that's the webinar. That's the feedback survey. Thanks, everyone. And so I'll go ahead and open the floor to questions. So I can see we did have some questions already in the Q&A. Okay, so first question is from Ahmed. He asked, my question is, do different versions of a protocol have different DOIs? So yes, they do, and we do have a way to manage that so that if someone follows the DOI to a previous version, they will be notified that a new version is available. So let's see if I can show an example of that. Because it is really nice. Yep. Okay, one moment. Okay, so we're back on this collection. And we can see that there are multiple versions. And so if I go to version 1, and I'm going to copy this DOI and paste it into a new window. And so what we can see is that I'm notified that I'm actually viewing an older version of that protocol, and there is a newer version available. So I can click on that and it will take me from version 1 to version 2. So, if you put the DOI for version 1 into your manuscript for submission, or if someone cites it, they will still know that there are other versions available and be able to access those. I hope that answered your question. And let me pull up my other questions. Okay, another one from Ahmed. Assuming I publish my protocol and I need to make some changes, but I don't want it to be versioned, is it possible to make changes to the published protocol without versioning, forking, or copying? So it depends how you publish it. So if you publish the protocol as a protocol with a DOI, it then becomes uneditable. So you can't make any additional changes um, unless you create a new version or a new fork. What you can do instead is publish a draft. And if you publish a draft, what will happen is, let me pull up an example of that. Am I still sharing? Can you guys see anything? Okay. I'm normally on my computer with many screens, and I'm not today because I'm in the office. Okay. All right. So we see in the different publishing options, you'll see publish or reserve DOI. So if you use one of these, you're publishing an uneditable record. But if you click post draft, what you'll see in that description there is it says make a preliminary version of your protocol public without a DOI. And then what you can do is take it down later, take it down, make edits, republish it, things like that. But if you are publishing something citable with a DOI, no, you can't make any changes without creating a new version. All right, next question. All right, next question is from Justine. Thank you for the presentation. I'm a novice. I wanted to upload my scoping review. I couldn't do this using the AI importer because my file exceeded 10 pages. So I sent my protocol in using the protocol entry. So how can I break my protocol that exceeds 10 pages into one protocol file? So that's the first question. There's a few in here. So I'll start by answering that first question, Justine. So it comes down to whatever file you are uploading into protocols.io, you'll just need to edit it to make it less than 10 pages. So if you have a Word document, for example, that's 20 pages, what you can do is create two Word documents, one that's 10 and then the other one that's 10, upload both of those using the AI importer, and then you'll have two separate protocols on protocols.io. And then you'll copy the steps from one protocol to the other. So yeah, it's just around kind of doing that process twice and copying the content over. And then I see your second question was, how long does it take to get feedback for protocol entries sent to your team? So I think we say it's around 1 week. So that's the limit. So it does take a little bit more time because we do have a team member behind the scenes who is inputting that protocol manually and checking over it. But if you have uploaded your protocol for import and you are waiting, I can check internally to see what the status of that is and let you know. Okay, and we've got another question. When I fork my protocol to create a new variant, do I get a new DOI? So when you fork a protocol to create a new variant, what you're doing is creating a new private fork. So it's a private editable protocol that wouldn't have a DOI yet. And then once you are ready to publish that protocol, um, and you do follow that process to publish it, yes, it will get a new DOI. Okay, I can see those are all of the questions in the Q&A. I will check the chat. Okay, I'm glad it could be helpful. Are there any more questions before we finish up? We've got a couple of minutes. No worries, Justine. All right, then, last call for any questions, and please remember to fill out the webinar feedback survey. Okay, Amit's asked for the links again. I assume you mean the link to the survey, rather, I'll just share many of them. So this is the survey. And then don't forget about Love Methods Week as well. We've got a couple of great, okay, the links to the protocols. I'll share all of them. All right, so this is the computational protocol. And then this is the more wet lab-based protocol. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day. I know.